am really pleased to be joined by Ali Jones this afternoon. Ali, thank you ever so much for giving up your time to do this, to come on and answer a few questions. I'm very grateful to you.
My absolute pleasure. Looking forward to it.
All right, so before we dive in on the questions, a little bit of context for anyone who's listening in the rare event that they don't know you. Let's give a bit of context. So I'd say a really commercial chief customer officer. And in fact, your title, if I'm correct, at your most recent role was Chief Customer and Omnichannel Officer. Was that right?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. So that was Matalan. And you're, hugely on B2C. So you've worked with brilliant brands, Co-op, M&S, Arcadia. So there'll be lots of interesting stories that come out of the back of this. I know you're involved with the Retail Trust. I know you're involved with WACL, which for anyone is Women in Advertising and Communications in London. And so it's been a busy year for you as well, because we've put down here in the last year, you've been included in the Campaign Power 100, and you're a judge at this year's FEs.
Yeah, and I've just signed up to do the Campaign Agency of the Year Awards as well, actually. So I'm really looking forward to that. They're always fabulous entries coming through there.
Definitely falls into the ask a busy person category, doesn't it, in terms of how you kind of fit all these things in. So let's kind of dive right in, if we may, which is about your career journey. Would you mind just giving an insight in terms of career journey to date and any standout moments that you want to share from along the way?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you've already mentioned, I've had the absolute privilege of working with some incredible brands, whether that be Next and M&S, Debenhams, Arcadia. I had a stint in Australia working for Woolworths Group, and I worked for the general merchandise arm of Woolworths, which is called Big W, which was a fantastic business. It's almost like the original Woolworths in the UK, although the names have absolutely nothing to do with each other, which is quite bizarre. And then the Co-op Group, which obviously is mainly retail, as you know, but also has an incredible life services division. So they're the #1 provider of funeral services in the UK, which not a lot of people know. And then most recently, Matalan. And I think I had the absolute fortune of starting my career at Next, where I learnt the craft of retail. And, they still are the original and probably best omni-channel retailer in the UK. And Simon Lord Wolfson has just announced his latest results, which are incredible. They've just in the previous results announced their first £1 billion plus profit. They continue to grow, and a lot of people, use them as the bellwether of retail. And I think by starting your career there, you learn about growing a customer base through customer acquisition, not just laying down stores, their catalogue business, their online business. And I had a time working for what was the Sears Group at the time, which then was taken over on the Freeman's catalogue. And again, you learn how to acquire customers, not through capital and laying down shops, but through customer acquisition, customer retention, customer growth. But back in those days, it was not a particularly sexy part of retail, and it was felling a lot of trees and sending a lot of direct marketing. And I still am a fan of direct marketing in the right places. But those skills are incredibly important for the omni-channel and the digital world that we're in today. And so by having that as a foundation for my career, it's helped me to be a strong marketer, but also, as you said, a commercial marketer, because you're measuring, even as a very junior person, what's your return on investment for absolutely everything that you do, which has been brilliant. And I've just progressed. I didn't have a grand plan in terms of I want to be at this company or at this role by this date. My approach has been just constantly looking for opportunities, looking at where I can learn more, looking at places where I can make a difference, and putting my name forward and putting my hand up and going, I'd like to do that. I'd like to be involved. And gradually, my bosses, my boss's peers built trust in me. And when new things came up, well, let's get Ali to have a look at it. Let's get Ali to help. And that's helped me to progress as quickly as I did, and to experience some incredible brands.
Well, quite a few things within there, but it struck me from what you've just said there that it was your sense of curiosity and, I guess, courage in terms of putting your hand up, to say that you wanted to get involved in stuff, but your natural curiosity and wanting to learn how those other parts of the business work, combined with presumably the culture of these environments like Next, which were quite ahead of their time really with the thinking that they had.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think retail is so fast paced, and I'm sure a lot of people that are part of your community have been in retail. And so you can't just keep doing what you did last year, 5 or 10% better. You've always got to be looking for new ideas and new innovations. And the only way you're going to do that is if you look out and you are curious and you lean in to what is going on in the industry. And so when I saw things that I thought, could be better or could be different, that's when I would lean in. I mean, I think that led me also when I was at Debenhams to get involved in a huge amount of things. I mean, you asked at the beginning of the conversation some standout moments, launching Nectar. Debenhams was one of the 4 founding partners of Nectar. It was the first big UK-based coalition scheme there to rival the powerful and all dominant Tesco's Clubcard. And that was incredible because that was, LMUK, as it was known as the time, and the marketing director of Sainsbury's, BP, Barclaycard, and myself sat around a table going, right, what do we want this to be? How do we want this to work? And it was a real collaborative moment. And at the same time, I launched the first gift card in the UK for Debenhams, which was amazing. We expanded designers at Debenhams, and we really took over running the online business for Debenhams, which was an incredible opportunity. But again, that was based on a lot of curious questioning and some chats with my CEO, Rob Templin, at the time, going, I think we can do more here. And he went, I think you're right. Will you do it for me? Will you help? Will you lean in and do this? And I kind of went, hell yes, because why wouldn't you? So
And
it's
what
been
about
brilliant.
the role of chief customer officer? Because I know clearly the kind of customer strategy, which I wanted to ask you about, because I know that's a strong skill of yours, but do you share your views as to the kind of the role and the core elements that you think are important to make that a success?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. If you look at the history of our area of marketing customer, we rebranded our title probably, more times than we rebranded most of our campaigns. Whereas, if you're a finance director, you're a finance director or you're a CFO. But I do think there is a fundamental difference between a CMO and a chief customer officer. And I think the first time I was able to be a really true chief customer officer was when I was brought into the co-op, because my area of influence and responsibility was much broader. So to kind of bring that to life for you and the listeners, yes, I looked after communication, campaigns, etc., as you would expect, everything from social and digital marketing through to, proposition development, etc. But I also looked after the customer and trade plan. I looked after the price and promo team. I looked after the range and space team. For a while, I looked after the product development team, the colleague insights and data team. Looked after external communications and colleague communications, and I set up the online business. So it was a very broad web of things that impact the customer or need customer insight and data at the heart of the decision making. And then it was very much partnering with the retail team, partnering with commercial, partnering with finance to then make sure that these propositions, these go-to-market plans were delivered effectively. And I think one of the things that I pride myself in, I'm not brilliant at, but it's what I work on to deliver for the business, is a great brand with a great customer proposition that is commercially sustainable, but can then also be operationally delivered. And I think unless you have all three, you don't have that business growth and that business success. And I was lucky enough to spend a lot of time going back to my next career doing short stints in commercial, in retail, in marketing to understand the whole business and to realize that a great strategy executed poorly is worse than an average strategy executed well.
You've really got that visibility and ownership almost end to end in terms of the different areas that you've described there. And you talk about the strategy side. We've seen massive external pressures on retail businesses in the last few years in particular. What do you need within a strategy? What changes might you make to a strategy to kind of take a business through those transformational times, I guess would be the way of phrasing it?
Oh, I think, and I think it's going to come up in some of the conversation we're going to have later, but resilience and the ability to adapt to change. It was a massively overused word in COVID, pivot. And in fact, when you were constantly on Teams meetings, I always used to put in the chat that meme from Friends where they're trying to pivot the sofa when they're taking it up the stairs, and that was always my thing. But I think even now post-COVID, there is so much change coming at us. What I as a leader need to do and other people need to do is to make sure that teams are comfortable with the fact that they're going to have to constantly iterate, improve and change because new things are coming along. But that needs to be done in the context of what is your brand purpose, what does it stand for, and what is going to make you distinctive or differentiated. So you can't flip-flop around, but you've got to realize that you might have created a path to your North Star, but it might have to be a bit of a wiggly path to get there because other things come along. And it's getting people comfortable with that, comfortable sometimes having to be in the grey a little bit, and sometimes having to be comfortable with things are going to be 70% okay, iterate and improve as you go. And I know I found that difficult when I was younger. I was very black and white in terms of, well, this is how it should be if it's going to be perfect. And it's like, but the world isn't perfect. So you've got to be comfortable in the grey.
And if you're leading teams, and you would have had some really big teams in some of these businesses, certainly in the last kind of 5 or so years, some kind of sizable teams. What are your tips, if you like, for what learnings for how you've led those teams through these times of changing?
Communication, 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 and then listening and understanding, what are their concerns, and also making sure that they're really clear on why you're doing things. I think when times are tough and you're having to change quickly, leaders can focus on communicating what needs to be different,
Yeah.
what needs to change, and they don't spend enough time on the why. And if you're going to have a really high performing team that is empowered to bring the ideas, the innovation, the creativity, really deliver sustainably in terms of results, they've got to understand the context and understand the why. You've got to treat them like grown-ups. And at the end of the day, my job is to find a team of very, very talented people, very diverse, talented people, but create the space for them to be brilliant. It's not my job to find the answers. It's my job to create the environment for them to find and deliver on the answers.
And is that, in terms of kind of being clear on the why, is that about having a clear North Star, if you like, that you're all, working towards? What kind of process do you go through to help the team, figure that out and give it the clarity?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably about 3 layers of sort of the why. Your team, not just your team, but the whole business needs to understand why the business exists and what role it plays, and did a lot of work on that at, say, Matalan and Co-op most recently. And that's quite interesting because they're both brands with great heritage, and it's about taking the heritage and what made it a successful launch or what made it its unique being in the first place, but recognizing the world has moved on, whether it be 40 years ago when Matalan was launched by John Hargreaves and did an incredible job, or 180 odd years ago when the Co-op was launched. So how do you make it relevant for the modern age and the current customer climate, etc., etc.? But then, if your team understand the why and what you're trying to achieve and what the guardrails are, that's great. But when you're trading, And, all the retailers and leisure and hospitality people on this call know that day in and day out trade, sometimes you have to change. And so making sure you're explaining the why on that, all of us marketeers have had the call from the CFO going, budgets are tight, we need to make some cost savings. And there you've got a team of people who've been delivering on a campaign or a go-to-market plan. It's working well, but in general, the business is having a tough time and you've got to tighten things up. And sitting down with them and explaining why, because they go, well, hang on a minute, what I'm doing is working. Like, why are you asking me to cut it back? And you have to explain the context of everything else that's going on in the business, and then go, okay, come on, guys, it's working, but how do we make it still work and work even better by just tightening things up? Let's put our thinking caps on, let's think a little bit differently, and let's use our agency partners to help us to do that as well.
Excellent. I like that. And thinking, I guess, so forward over the next kind of 12, 24 months, I know your peer group are also kind of chief customer officers. What do you think is going to be on that priority list for CCOs over this next kind of 12 or 24 months?
I think it's being relentless about making sure the customer is in all the conversations, and it's not just a customer plan conversation, because everything that you do, whether it's decisions you make on your colleagues, whether it's decisions you make on your product, whether it's decisions you make on your investment portfolio, your capital investment, your IT plan, will have an impact on the customer. And so it's ensuring that the really right data and insights are brought into those conversations at the right time. And they're done not just as you at the voice, but making sure that you're equipping your peers around that C-suite table or the table below with the right data. I mean, so often you see people coming in and they say they are being close to the customer because they're giving you their opinion of what the customer wants, as opposed to the facts. And the great way to help with that, particularly when you're moving at speed, is bring those frontline colleagues into the conversation, because they're the ones that serve the customers every day, or they're the ones that speak to them on the phone if they're in a contact center, etc. And so at the co-op, we were very, very good at bringing colleagues into the centre and to the support hub to be part of projects. So actually they could be there constantly. Or even when we were doing some new initiatives post-pandemic, we set up working groups. And because we were all working, more hybrid, we were seconding in colleagues from stores that would just join meetings on Teams, just to kind of give their opinion into the projects as they were developing. And that really helped us to move at speed. But more importantly, when you're adopting whatever it is that that project is doing, colleagues are then going, oh, well, hang on, some of my peers have been helping to develop that. And so actually my voice has been heard in this. And so their adoption and their delivery can then be significantly better. So I think that is fundamental. But then equally, I was having a conversation with somebody this morning actually about this. It's how you make sure the right effectiveness measures and KPIs are in the business scorecard. When you're trying to hold on to your marketing budget, or you're trying to explain what some of the long-term brand investment is doing, or investment in technology that helps you to deliver from a customer and a marcoms perspective, it's quite hard when you get hourly reads of sales. And so you have all these KPIs coming in, from margin to, ROAS to, sales and like-for-like sales. And then you've got something like NPS or brand efficacy, and they don't shift on an hourly basis, but sales figures can shift on a daily basis. And so I would really encourage, chief customer officers and CMOs and heads of marketing, etc., to build up a much more rounded view of all the KPIs and how the marketing driven KPIs fit into that, and build those relationships with the CFO. And then I think the final thing to your question is, you've got to look outwards and really understand all this new technology, because it is changing at pace. And so you have to ensure that there is a trunk of capability and budget that is running innovation. You've got your core, campaigns and plans and propositions that work, that you're constantly iterating, but you need that innovation pot fund over there to try and figure out what's coming around the corner. So you don't necessarily have to be first to market on it, but you need to be in the first 25% pack.
And it's continuous innovation, isn't it? It's not sort of one-off investment. So continuous innovation, a holistic view at the KPIs and measurements, and the one that I really love is getting that emotional buy-in from colleagues, because it doesn't half make it easier as you're leading a team. If you've got that emotional buy-in, it quickly, filters through the business then, and makes the whole thing significantly easier to deliver.
It certainly does.
Question on advice for you now, because I know a lot of people listening here may be either head of level or director level, and looking and thinking, this is my ultimate goal, is to be a chief customer officer. How do I now make those transitions? What advice would you share with anyone who set their sights on that role, and kind of want some good tips?
I think you need to make sure you've got a breadth of experience in the broader customer discipline. So if you've been very much in a comms role and growing up through a comms role, that's going to, be a great foundation, but you need to understand more about, if you're retail, what it's like to deliver it in stores. You need to understand more of the commercial levers. So I would encourage people to think about a bit more of a squiggly career. Try something else, particularly if you can do it within the business, because then they know and trust you, and then you can have the conversation to come back. Or sometimes you have to do a squiggly career by leaving a business to then come back 4 or 5 years later. So I would definitely think about that. Make sure you understand MarTech. I'm hearing, and you're probably hearing the same thing, that there's a lot more questions of marketeers around the technology side of things.
Oh,
So
100%.
build up,
Every single brief.
build up your understanding of that, whether it's through working with your your digital products team or your IT team, or working with your agencies and your data partners, and then I'd say build relationships with the rest of the business, finance, commercial, the channel teams. Really understand the broader business, because at the end of the day, as I talked about in our last little segment, you've got to connect the whole business to the customer and make sure that the customer is at the heart of all that decision making. And if you don't understand A, that part of the business, and B, what are the pressures that your peers and their teams have got, you'll end up having a bit of conflict. And there's always a friendly conflict between customer and commercial, but if you really understand what they've got to deliver and the things that keep them up at night, you can help them achieve them by making things more customer centric and doing things that help both the customer and the commercial bottom line.
Loved it. Great advice. Thank you very much for that, Ali. So the final question is one that it's really, especially to me, I'm a big believer in the power of positivity, resilient, or more importantly, growth mindset. You may have seen that I've recommended some books about manifestation. Be Your Future Self now is one of my kind of favorite books at the moment. So it's it's not unsurprising that everybody at this level that I interview for this Q&A series is pretty naturally positive, resilient, growth mindset. But any rituals that you're happy to share? Again, any kind of tips or advice as to how you maintain your energy levels that you could share that may help others?
Yeah, of course. I think, as you said, life is tough at the moment. It's relentless. It feels like we're all working twice as hard as we were 10, 15 years ago. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but it definitely feels like it. So, but it's all about finding what it is that sort of refills your cup, your virtual cup of energy. And that needs to be something that you consider both in your personal life and your work life. In my personal life, I've got an amazing husband, a gorgeous 22-year-old son, and he's, a few years ago he came out of the just getting grunt answers, and he now will have a conversation. So when he's home, you know, from university, we go on fantastic walks and have really, really good chats. And that fills my cup. That's a great connection. I've become a stereotypical 50-plus-year-old playing paddle tennis and doing reformer Pilates just to get some exercise in, which is fantastic. But when it comes to work, my cup is filled up by working with people and finding great ideas and innovation. I mean, I still remember, you know, the initial conversations with an incredible marketer, Amanda Jennings, known as AJ, who some people may know, just around Co-op Live that we did there at the Co-op festivals, bringing together people with amazing ideas that might seem quite bonkers to start with, but then you start to kind of work them and go, this is incredible. I used to run a thing called Ali Download at Co-op as well, where I'd invite really junior members of the team, because as you quite rightly pointed out, my Co-op team was pretty large. And I was very conscious, particularly in COVID, when we were all on Teams, I wasn't seeing everybody. You know, you weren't walking the floor and bumping into people by the photocopier or in the coffee queue. And so by having this Ali download, it allowed anyone in the team to come up with, here's an idea I'm working on. Here's something I think is interesting that they wanted to show me. And I discovered incredible talent, incredible ideas. And I was able to kind of go, oh, well, that's amazing. Connect with that person to do that. And then this innovation started to come through. And that's just so exciting to see this young talent. It just makes me, it just fills my cup up as well. So it's finding what it is that does it. But for most people, it's about people and connections. So, you know, getting yourself out there with talented people, whether they're in your business or in your agencies or through conferences or, you know, networking with people like yourself, that's where you can really get new ideas and reset you, I think.
I like the idea of Annie Download. And I also need to do reformer Pilates, and it's something that has eluded me to date, but every single person I've asked swears by it. So I think that's
Yeah.
definitely on my list. Ali, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your your story and your advice and guidance. Very grateful to you, and I'm sure everyone will really enjoy hearing it.
Oh, thank you very much. It's been great to chat. Take care.
Pleasure.